I was standing in the middle of my son Brandon's new living room, surrounded by more than 30 family members and friends, when he raised his voice and told me to leave. His wife Brittany threw her head back and laughed. Everyone froze. I felt my heart crack open as I turned toward the door, tears already blurring my vision. My hand reached for my coat. Then Richard, my husband of 40 years, stood up from the couch. He spoke 5 words that silenced the entire room. The deeds in our name. Let me take you back 3 years. Because this story didn't start at that housewarming party. It started the day Brandon brought Brittany home to meet us for the first time. Brandon had always been our only child, and Richard and I poured everything we had into raising him right. We weren't wealthy, but Richard built a successful plumbing supply business over 30 years, and I worked as a school librarian until I retired. We gave Brandon a good life, sent him to state college, and watched him grow into a kind, thoughtful young man who called his mother every Sunday without fail. When Brandon was 29, he met Brittany at the accounting firm where he worked. She was a receptionist there, 25 years old, with blonde hair she wore in a high ponytail and a smile that seemed bright enough. That first dinner at our house, she complimented everything. My pot roast was delicious. Our home was charming. Richard's stories about the business were fascinating. I wanted to like her. I really did. But there were small things that nagged at me. The way Shed interrupt Brandon when he was talking, then laugh it off as teasing. How Shed check her phone constantly during dinner, barely looking up. When Brandon mentioned Head promised to help Richard install new shelving in the garage that weekend, Brittany's smile tightened. We already made plans, she said, even though Brandon looked confused. I told myself I was being overprotective. Every mother struggles when her son finds someone new. I swallowed my concerns and smiled through the engagement party, the bridal shower, the wedding. Richard was more skeptical. After the rehearsal dinner, he said quietly, "Something's not right with that girl, Ashley. I can't put my finger on it, but watch." The wedding was lovely. I'll give Brittany that. She knew how to put on a show. Brandon looked happy standing at the altar, and I cried like mothers do. I hoped I was wrong about my instincts. I prayed this would all work out. The first year of their marriage, things changed slowly enough that Brandon didn't seem to notice. Those Sunday phone calls became every other week, then monthly. When I'd call him, Brittany would answer his phone. "He's busy right now, Ashley," she'd say, my own name sounding cold in her mouth. "No more, Mom. Just Ashley," like I was some acquaintance. Sunday dinners at our house had been a tradition for years. After the wedding, Brittany started finding reasons they couldn't come. Brandon had to work. They had other plans. Brittany wasn't feeling well. By the second year, we saw them maybe once every 2 months, and when we did, Brittany dominated every conversation. She'd talk about their apartment being too small, too old, too far from good shopping. She made little comments about our house, too. "This furniture is so dated," she'd say, running her finger along my grandmother's credenza. "You really should update." I bit my tongue so many times it's a wonder I had one left. Richard noticed how Brandon had changed. Our son used to be confident, quick to laugh. Now he seemed tired, nervous. He'd start to tell us something, then glance at Brittany and stop mid-sentence. When we'd invite them somewhere, Brandon would look to his wife before answering, waiting for her approval. "She's isolating him," Richard said one night after they'd left. Classic control behavior. I knew he was right, but what could we do? Brandon was a grown man. If we pushed too hard, we'd drive him further away. So we waited, stayed loving, kept the door open. Then, 6 months ago, Brandon showed up at our house alone on a Tuesday evening. Richard and I were just finishing dinner when we heard the knock. Brandon stood on the porch looking defeated, his shoulders slumped. "Can I talk to you both?" he asked. We sat in the living room, and Brandon explained their situation. The apartment rent was increasing. Brittany wanted a house, something with a yard and extra bedrooms. They'd been looking but couldn't afford anything decent. His voice cracked a little when he asked if we could help with a down payment. My motherly instincts kicked in immediately. This was my son. asking for help. Of course, we'd do whatever we could. Richard was more measured. He asked about their finances, their savings, their plans. Brandon admitted they had almost nothing saved. Brittany spent money as fast as he earned it, sometimes faster. If we help, Richard said carefully, we need protections in place. Over the next 2 weeks, we worked out an arrangement. We'd put $75,000 toward a house. That was a significant chunk of our retirement savings, money we'd worked decades to build. In exchange, our names would be on the deed as co-owners. It wasn't about control, Richard explained. It was about protecting our investment and ensuring neither of us got taken advantage of. Brandon agreed immediately. He seemed relieved, grateful. Brittany was another story. When she found out about the co-ownership requirement, her face hardened. Why can't it just be a gift? She asked. Don't you trust your own son? Richard stood firm. This is how we're comfortable doing it, or we can't help at all. Brittany smiled, but her eyes stayed cold. Fine, she said. Whatever makes you happy. They found a house 3 weeks later, a nice 3-bedroom ranch in a decent neighborhood. Richard and I went through all the paperwork with them, made sure everything was legal and clear. Our names went on the deed alongside Brandon's. Brittany's name wasn't included because she brought no money to the purchase, but she'd have spousal rights anyway through Brandon. The past month leading up to the housewarming party was strange. Brittany asked me to help her decorate. I was thrilled. Maybe this was a peace offering, a chance to bond. I spent 3 full days there, painting the guest bedroom a soft blue, hanging curtains, helping arrange furniture. My back ached and my hands were covered in paint, but I didn't mind. This was for Brandon, for their future. Brittany barely thanked me. She criticized almost every choice I made. The blue was too dark, the curtains hung crooked, the furniture arrangement blocked the natural flow. By the 3rd day, I was exhausted and hurt, but I kept smiling. The morning of the housewarming party, I arrived early to help set up. Brittany was in the kitchen on her phone, talking to someone. I was in the hallway hanging my coat when I heard her voice drift out. Once we get them off the deed, this place is all mine. Brandon's too weak to stand up to me. His mother won't know what hit her. I froze, coat halfway off my shoulders. My heart started pounding. Had I heard that correctly? I stood perfectly still, straining to hear more. Brittany laughed. That same harsh sound it heard at family dinners. Tonight should be interesting. I've got plans. I quickly finished hanging my coat and walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. Brittany smiled at me, sweet as sugar. Ashley, you're early. Can you start putting out the cheese platters? I nodded, not trusting my voice. My hands shook as I unwrapped cheese. What had she meant? What were her plans? Part of me wanted to believe I'd misunderstood, but deep down, I knew. I'd known for 3 years that something was very wrong with this girl. I just didn't know how wrong until the party started. The guests started arriving around 6, family members I hadn't seen in months, Brandon's friends from work, some of Brittany's relatives I'd only met at the wedding. The house filled with voices and laughter. I moved through the rooms, playing the part of the helpful mother-in-law, making sure everyone had drinks, that the food stayed replenished. Richard stood near the fireplace talking with his brother Thomas. Brandon was showing some friends the new deck head built in the backyard. Brittany held court in the living room, the perfect hostess, accepting compliments on her beautiful new home. Her home. Not their home. Not our home, her home. I heard it over and over as the evening went on. Around 7:30, most everyone had arrived. I was standing in the middle of the living room, holding a plate of crackers, when Brittany's voice cut through the conversation. Ashley, we need to talk about boundaries. The room didn't quiet immediately. People were still chatting, laughing, but there was something in her tone that made nearby conversations falter. I turned to her, confused. I'm sorry. Brittany set down her wine glass with a deliberate clink. You've been here all week, rearranging things, making decisions about my house without asking me. It's disrespectful. My face flushed hot. Around us, more people were turning to watch. I was just trying to help. You asked me to. I asked for help, not for you to take over. Brittany's voice grew louder. This is exactly the problem. You think because you helped with the down payment, you can control everything. Brandon appeared from the hallway, his face confused. Britt, what's going on? She turned to him, and I saw calculation in her eyes. Your mother has been insufferable. She treats this house like it's hers. She needs to leave. The room went quiet then, completely quiet. I felt 30 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Brandon, I said softly, looking at my son. I don't understand what's happening. His face was torn, conflicted. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Brittany, then at me. Mom, maybe you should, he started. Yes, Brittany interrupted. Maybe you should go. This is our celebration, not yours. Brandon didn't defend me. He just stood there. And something inside me shattered. My own son, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd helped just weeks ago, was letting his wife throw me out in front of everyone. I felt tears start to build. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak without crying, and I wouldn't give Brittany that satisfaction. I set down the plate of crackers on the nearest table and turned toward the coat closet. That's when Brittany laughed, not a small chuckle, but a full, loud laugh that echoed through the silent room. The sound of it struck me like a physical blow. I grabbed my coat, fumbling with shaking hands. My sister Carol was standing near the door, her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Richard's brother Thomas looked like he wanted to say something but didn't know what. Brandon's cousin Amy stared at the floor. Everyone watched me prepare to leave, humiliated and heartbroken, and no one said a word. I had the coat halfway on when I heard Richard's chair scrape against the floor. I didn't turn around. I couldn't bear to see pity in his eyes, too. Then his voice, strong and steady, filled the room. The deed's in our name. I stopped, turned slowly. Richard stood near the couch, his face calm but his jaw set in a way I recognized. It was the look he got when someone tried to cheat him in business, when someone mistook his kindness for weakness. Brittany's laugh died in her throat. Brandon's face went pale. What? Brittany's voice was sharp now, defensive. Richard pulled his phone from his pocket with deliberate slowness. Ashley and I co-own this house. Our names are on the legal deed alongside Brandon's. We put $75,000 into this property. If anyone is leaving, it won't be my wife. The room was so quiet I could hear someone's watch ticking. My heart pounded in my chest. I'd never loved Richard more than I did in that moment. Brittany's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. Brandon, tell them. It's true, Brandon said quietly, not meeting anyone's eyes. They're on the deed. Brittany spun to face the room, like she was addressing a jury. This is exactly what I'm talking about. They're controlling us. They think they own us because they have money. This is manipulation. My sister Carol stepped forward. Brittany, Ashley was just trying to help decorate. You asked her to. Stay out of this. Brittany snapped. Then, to the room. Don't you see what they're doing? They want to control every aspect of our lives. They won't let us be independent. Richard's brother Thomas spoke up. Richard and Ashley helped you buy a house. That's not control, that's generosity. But Brittany was on a roll now, her voice getting louder, more desperate. A gift with strings attached isn't a gift. They're holding it over our heads. They're toxic. Richard held up his phone. I have something everyone should see. Dad, don't, Brandon said, but his voice was weak. Richard's fingers moved across the screen. For the past 3 months, I've been concerned about how our son was being treated. Call it a father's instinct. So I paid attention. I documented things. He turned the phone toward the room. I couldn't see the screen from where I stood, but I watched people's faces change as they looked. Shock, disgust, confusion. These are text messages, Richard said, between Brittany and her friend Courtney, downloaded from Brandon's phone backup, which he gave me access to when we were setting up his new phone plan. Brittany lunged forward, trying to grab the phone. That's private. You had no right. Richard held the phone high, out of her reach, and kept talking. This one is from 2 months ago. Brittany writes, Brandon's mother is so pathetic, always calling and trying to be involved. I'm slowly cutting her out. He doesn't even notice. My hand went to my chest. Hearing it said out loud hurt more than it expected. Here is another one, Richard continued, scrolling. From 3 weeks ago, I can't stand Ashley. She thinks she's so perfect. Once I get full control of the house situation, I'm cutting her off completely. Around the room, people shifted uncomfortably. Brittany's mother Linda and her sister Christine stood together near the kitchen, their faces tight. Those are taken out of context, Brittany said, but her voice wavered. Richard kept scrolling, kept reading, message after message, showing a pattern of manipulation, of calculated cruelty, of plans to isolate Brandon from his family. With each one, I watched my son's face change. Had clearly never seen these. His eyes widened, then filled with something that looked like horror. Stop it, Brittany screamed. Everyone, he's making this up. He probably faked these somehow. Then Richard found the message that made the room gasp. His voice was steady as he read it aloud. Brandon's parents are loaded. The dad's business is worth at least $2 million. Once I get full control of this house, I'll convince Brandon to ask for more. We just need to play this right. He's so desperate for my approval, he'll do anything. His mother will hand over anything if she thinks it'll keep me happy and keep Brandon in her life. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just dislike. This wasn't just a difficult daughter-in-law. This was predatory, calculated, cold. Brandon's face had gone from pale to gray. He stared at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Brittany? Is this real? She turned on him, vicious now that her mask was slipping. Of course it's real. Did you think I married you for love? Look at you, Brandon. You're boring. You're weak, but your parents have money, and I knew how to get it. The cruelty in her voice made people actually step back. My son looked like he'd been slapped, but Brittany wasn't done. She turned to me, and her face twisted with something ugly. And you, Ashley, you're so desperate to be loved, so desperate to be needed. You made this easy. All I had to do was let you help, let you think you were important, and you'd hand over anything. Tears were streaming down my face now, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of rage. Richard put his phone away. I think we've heard enough. Brittany's family members, Linda and Christine, rushed forward. Linda grabbed Brittany's arm. We're leaving. Now. Mom, they're ganging up on me, Brittany protested. But Linda's face was hard. I knew you had your issues, Brittany. But this is beyond. Christine wouldn't even look at her sister as they pulled her toward the door. Brittany fought them, still screaming about how we were all against her, how this wasn't fair, how everyone would be sorry. The door slammed behind them. The remaining guests stood frozen, uncertain what to do or say. Brandon stood in the middle of his living room, in his new house, looking completely shattered. I wanted to go to him. Every instinct screamed to comfort my child, but Richard caught my eye and gave a small shake of his head. Not yet. People started gathering their things. The party was clearly over. My sister Carol hugged me tight before leaving. Call me later, she whispered. Thomas clapped Richard on the shoulder, a gesture of solidarity. Brandon's cousin Amy approached me hesitantly. Ashley, I'm sorry. I should have said something when she told you to leave. It's okay, I managed to say. It's not okay. None of this is okay. One by one, people left. Some hugged us. Some avoided eye contact, embarrassed by what they'd witnessed. Within 20 minutes, the house was empty except for Richard, Brandon, and me. Brandon stood by the window, his back to us. His shoulders shook slightly. He was crying. Son, Richard started. Don't, Brandon said, his voice thick. Just don't. Richard and I exchanged a glance. There was nothing we could say that would make this better. Our son had just had his heart and his trust shattered in front of everyone he knew. We're going home, Richard said quietly. When you're ready to talk, you know where we are. We drove home in silence. When we got inside, I collapsed on the couch and cried for an hour straight. Richard held me, not saying anything, just being there. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling. What if he chooses her? I whispered into the dark. He won't, Richard said. But I heard the uncertainty in his voice. But what if he does? What if he's so embarrassed, so hurt, that he doubles down? What if he decides we're the problem? Richard rolled over to face me. Then we love him anyway. From a distance if we have to. But we don't compromise ourselves again. We don't let anyone treat you that way, Ashley. Not even our son. I knew he was right, but knowing didn't make it hurt less. The week that followed was torture. Brandon didn't call. He didn't text. Every time my phone made a sound, I jumped, hoping it was him. But there was nothing. Radio silence. I sent him a text on the third day. I love you. I'm here when you're ready. He didn't respond. I tried calling on the fifth day. It went straight to voicemail. Richard counseled patience, but I could see the worry in his eyes too. Wed exposed Brittany? Yes, but at what cost? Had we lost our son in the process? On the eighth day, my phone rang at 2 a.m. I grabbed it, heart racing, hoping desperately it was Brandon, but it was an unknown number. I answered anyway. Hello, Mrs. Ashley. A man's voice, unfamiliar. Yes, my name is Harold Jenkins. I'm a private investigator. I need to tell you something about Brittany Caldwell. I sat up in bed, fully awake now. Richard stirred beside me, sensing something was wrong. Who is this? I asked again, my voice sharper. My name is Harold Jenkins, the man repeated. I'm sorry to call so late, but I've been trying to reach you for 3 days. Your son's wife, Brittany, has a history you should know about. Richard was fully awake now, sitting up beside me. What kind of history? The kind that puts your family in danger, Mrs. Ashley. Can we meet tomorrow? I'd rather explain this in person. We met Harold Jenkins the next morning at a diner 20 minutes from our house. He was a thin man in his 50s, with tired eyes and a manila folder thick with papers. He ordered coffee and got straight to business. 3 years ago, I was hired by a man named William Palmer. His son Stephen had gotten involved with a woman who isolated him from his family, manipulated him out of money, and nearly cost him everything. That woman was Brittany Ann Caldwell. Richard and I exchanged glances. The same Brittany? I asked, though I already knew. Harold opened the folder and spread photos across the table. There was Brittany, younger, with darker hair, but unmistakably her. She has a pattern. She targets men from successful families, men who are kind and somewhat passive. She moves in quickly, isolates them, and begins extracting money and assets. When she's exposed or gets what she wants, she moves on to the next target. How many times has she done this? Richard asked. That we know of? 4 times, including your son. But there could be more. Harold explained that Brittany would typically date a man for 6 to 8 months, push for marriage quickly, and then begin the isolation process. She'd manufacture conflicts with the man's family, making herself the victim. She'd control finances, monitor communications, and slowly convince her target that everyone was against them except her. Stephen Palmer almost signed over his trust fund to her, Harold said. $500,000. His father intervened just in time, exposed her, and she disappeared. Changed cities, changed her appearance slightly, and found a new target. Brandon, I whispered. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Ashley. Mr. Palmer hired me to track her movements, to warn potential victims when we could. We found out she'd moved to your area 2 years ago. We knew she was working at an accounting firm. By the time we identified your son as her new target, they were already married. Why didn't you contact us then? Richard asked, and I could hear the anger building in his voice. We tried. Mr. Palmer sent letters to your home address. They were returned, marked refused. We suspect Brittany intercepted them. We tried calling, but the calls were never returned. We even hired a local attorney to attempt contact. But by then, your son had cut off most communication with you. There was no legal basis to intervene. I thought about those months after the wedding, how hard it had been to reach Brandon. All those unreturned calls, mail I never received, she'd been blocking us even then. Harold pushed more papers toward us. This is everything we have on her. Police reports from angry ex-boyfriends, though none ever pressed charges. Financial records showing sudden deposits and withdrawals. Character references from people she's burned. It's all here. What do we do with this? I asked. That depends on what you want. Mr. Palmer's goal is to stop her from doing this to another family. If your son is willing to cooperate, to share his story, we might be able to build a case that prevents her from continuing this pattern. Richard leaned back in the booth. Our son isn't speaking to us right now. Give him time, Harold said. Men who've been manipulated like this need time to process. The shame alone can be overwhelming, but hell come around. They usually do, once they see the full picture. We took the folder home and spent the rest of the day reading through it. Each story was heartbreaking. Each man thought he was the only one, thought had failed somehow. None of them realized they were victims of someone who'd perfected the art of emotional manipulation. That evening, I tried calling Brandon again. This time, he answered. Mom. His voice was tired, defeated. Brandon, honey, can we talk? I don't know what to say. He sounded so lost. You don't have to say anything. Just listen. Your father and I love you. What happened at the party? What Brittany said and did? None of that changes how we feel about you. There was a long silence. Then, I'm so ashamed. You have nothing to be ashamed of. You were manipulated by someone who's very good at what she does. I let her throw you out, Mom, in front of everyone. I just stood there. My heart ached. I know, and I won't lie. That hurt. But I also know that wasn't really you. That was a man who'd been broken down, isolated, and controlled. The real you, my son, would never have done that. I don't know who I am anymore, he whispered. You're Brandon. You're my son. And you're going to get through this. She's still here, Mom, in the house. She won't leave. She says she has rights. Richard took the phone from me. Brandon, listen carefully. You need to document everything. If she threatens you, record it if you legally can. If she tries to take anything, document it. And you need to talk to a lawyer tomorrow. Not next week. Tomorrow. I can't afford. Well, help. But you have to take action, son. This doesn't get better by waiting. We talked for another 30 minutes, the longest conversation Wed had with Brandon in 2 years. He agreed to meet with a lawyer. He agreed to start documenting everything. And he agreed to meet us for lunch the next day, without Brittany. After we hung up, I felt the first glimmer of hope I'd had in days. Our son was still in there, under all the damage Brittany had done. He just needed help finding his way back. But the very next afternoon, everything changed. We were supposed to meet Brandon at a restaurant at noon. At 11:45, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. Mrs. Ashley? This is Gregory Thompson, Brandon's supervisor at work. Mr. Thompson, is everything all right? I'm not sure. That's why I'm calling. I hope I'm not overstepping. But something's been bothering me, and after what I heard happened at their party, I felt I should reach out. What is it? Brittany has been coming to the office, not just occasionally, but regularly. She comes during Brandon's lunch break, and I've noticed she always steers him to the conference rooms for privacy. Last week, I overheard her asking our office manager about Brandon's salary, his benefits package, his retirement contributions. At first I thought maybe she was just being practical, helping with family finances. But, I prompted. But yesterday, she cornered me directly, asked about Brandon's potential for advancement, what the salary cap was for his position, whether the company had any kind of profit-sharing or inheritance structure for long-term employees. Mrs. Ashley, she was calculating something. The way she asked these questions, it was like she was evaluating an asset, not asking about her husband's career. My stomach turned. Did Brandon know she was asking these things? I don't think so. She made a point of saying not to mention it to him, that she was planning a surprise. But it didn't feel right. And then I heard from my wife, who heard from her sister, about what happened at your son's housewarming party. The pieces clicked together, and I just felt like you should know. I thanked Mr. Thompson and hung up, my hands shaking. Brittany wasn't just trying to get the house, she was calculating every asset Brandon had or might have. She was looking at his entire financial life like a predator circling prey. Richard and I were quiet as we drove to meet Brandon. When we arrived at the restaurant, he was already there, sitting in a booth in the back. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, unshaven, his clothes wrinkled. I didn't sleep last night, he said before we even sat down. We fought for hours. We ordered food we didn't eat, and listened as Brandon talked. He told us about the constant criticism, the way Brittany monitored his phone, the way Shed convinced him that we were controlling and toxic. Head believed it because he loved her, and because she was so convincing. She told me you didn't really love me, he said, tears in his eyes. That you only helped with the house to control me. I believed her. Mom, I'm so sorry. But I believed her. I reached across the table and took his hand. She's very good at what she does, sweetheart. That's what I don't understand. How is she so good at this? It's like she had a playbook. That's when Richard told him about Harold Jenkins, about Brittany's history, about the other men Shed done this to. Brandon listened, his face cycling through emotions. Disbelief, horror, recognition, grief. So I was just a mark, he said finally. A target. You were a victim. I corrected. There's a difference. We gave Brandon the folder Harold had compiled. He spent 20 minutes reading through it, his face getting paler with each page. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. I need to get out of this marriage. Yes, Richard said. You do, but I'm scared. What if she ruins me? She knows everything about my life. She could destroy my reputation, my career. That's why you need to act first, Richard said. Talk to a lawyer, file for divorce, document everything, and stay strong. Brandon left that lunch with a plan and with hope, fragile as it was. Richard and I watched him drive away, and I prayed this was the turning point. But we had no idea just how much worse things were about to get. 3 days after that lunch, at 2 a.m, my phone rang again. This time it was Brandon, and I could hear panic in his voice before he even spoke. Mom, I'm at the hospital. It's Dad. I was already out of bed, my heart racing. What happened? He collapsed. Aunt Carol called me. She said he couldn't breathe. The ambulance just took him. I looked at Richard's side of the bed, already empty. How had I not heard him get up? How had I not known? I threw on clothes and drove to the hospital with my heart in my throat. Richard had seemed fine yesterday. Tired. Maybe. But fine. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when we were so close to getting Brandon back. At the hospital, a nurse directed me to the emergency room. Brandon was in the waiting area, his head in his hands. He looked up when I approached, his face stricken. He's in with the doctors now. They're running tests. Mom, I'm so sorry. If I hadn't put you both through all this stress. Stop, I said firmly. This is not your fault. My sister Carol appeared from around the corner, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed me one and sat beside me. He called me, she explained. Said he felt weird, like his heart was racing. I told him to hang up and call 911, but he insisted on calling you first. By the time I got to your house, the ambulance was already there. We waited. Those hours in a hospital waiting room are their own special kind of torture. Every time a doctor walked by, I tensed, waiting for news. Brandon paced. Carol prayed quietly. I just sat there, numb. Finally, around 6 a.m, a doctor came out. Mrs. Ashley. I stood so fast I nearly fell. How is he? Your husband experienced a severe cardiac arrhythmia. His heart rhythm was dangerously irregular. We've stabilized him for now, but he's going to need medication, lifestyle changes, and close monitoring. The stress of the past few weeks certainly didn't help. Can I see him? Hez sleeping now, but you can sit with him. Richard looked small in that hospital bed, hooked up to monitors and IVs. His face was pale, his breathing steady but labored. I took his hand and held it, feeling the warmth of his skin, reassuring myself he was still here. Brandon stood in the doorway, not coming in. I should go, he said quietly. Stay. Richard's voice was weak, but clear. His eyes opened, finding Brandon. Please, son, stay. Brandon moved to the other side of the bed, tears streaming down his face. Dad, I'm so sorry. All of this, the stress, the fighting. Not your fault. Richard managed. Brittany's fault. Over the next hour, other family members arrived. Richard's brother Thomas brought Julie. Carol's husband stopped by before work. The small hospital room filled with people who loved us, who'd stood by us through this nightmare. The only person who didn't come was Brittany. Brandon's phone kept buzzing. He'd glance at it, his face tightening, then ignore it. Finally, around noon, he stepped into the hallway to answer a call. I could hear his voice through the door, tense and sharp. When he came back in, his face was hard. That was Brittany. She said if I don't come home right now, she's changing the locks. She can't do that, Thomas said. It's your house too. She doesn't care what she can or can't do, Brandon said. She just does it. Richard squeezed my hand weakly. Son, turn off your phone. Stay here. Be with your family. Brandon looked at his phone, at his father in the hospital bed, at me sitting beside Richard. I watched something shift in his face. A decision being made. He turned off his phone. For the rest of that day, Brandon stayed. He sat with his father. He talked to the doctors. He made coffee runs for everyone. And slowly, I watched my son come back to himself. Without Brittany's voice in his ear, without her manipulation, he was starting to remember who he was. That evening, Richard was stable enough to talk more. The three of us sat together, no other family around, and Richard said what needed to be said. Brandon, you're going to make a choice soon. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, but soon. You're going to choose between your wife and your family, between the life she's built for you and the truth. Dad, I've already chosen, Brandon said. I chose when I turned off my phone. I chose when I stayed here instead of going to her. Good, Richard said. Because I need you to know something. Your mother and I love you more than anything in this world. We always will. But we won't be disrespected again. We won't be used again. If you go back to Brittany, if you choose that life, we'll always love you. But we'll love you from a distance. Do you understand? Brandon nodded, tears in his eyes. I understand. And I'm not going back. I can't. Not after everything I've learned. Not after seeing what she's done to you, to Mom, to me. Then you need to be strong, Richard said. Because when you turn that phone back on, when you go home, she's going to fight. She's going to manipulate. She's going to try every trick she knows. I know, Brandon said. But I'm done being weak. I'm done being controlled. Richard smiled, the first real smile I'd seen on his face in days. That's my son. That night, I stayed at the hospital while Brandon went home. I was worried about him facing Brittany alone, but he insisted. I need to do this, Mom. I need to stand up to her myself. I didn't sleep. I kept my phone on, volume high, waiting for Brandon to call if he needed help. But the call never came. What happened instead was so much worse, and so much better, than I could have imagined. Brandon later told me what happened when he got home that night. The house was dark when he pulled into the driveway. He sat in his car for a few minutes, gathering courage, preparing himself for the confrontation he knew was coming. When he unlocked the front door, the house was silent. For a moment, he thought maybe Brittany wasn't home. Maybe Shed actually left like Shed threatened. Then he heard her voice coming from the kitchen. She was on the phone, her tone bright and cheerful in a way that made his skin crawl. He stood in the hallway, listening. Some instinct told him not to announce his presence yet. No, Richard's little heart episode is actually perfect timing, Brittany was saying, and Brandon felt his blood go cold. Brandon's all emotional, guilty, whatever. Once the old man dies, Ashley will be completely vulnerable. Brandon will inherit everything. Then we make our real move. Brandon pulled out his phone, hands shaking, and started recording. Brittany laughed. That harsh sound had somehow convinced himself was charming once. The old lady will sign over whatever we want if she thinks it'll keep Brandon in her life. And stupid Brandon won't even see it happening. He's so desperate to please everyone, so desperate to be the good son. It's pathetic. There was a pause. Then, Marcus, stop worrying. This marriage is just business anyway. I told you that from the start. Once I have the money, I'm done. We can finally be together for real. Brandon's so boring in bed anyway. At least you know what you're doing. Brandon's stomach turned. Marcus. She'd been cheating on him. Of course she had. Brittany continued, oblivious to her audience. I'm meeting you tomorrow at 2, while Brandon's at work. Don't be late this time. And yes, I'll bring those papers we talked about. If we can forge Brandon's signature on the loan applications, we can pull out at least $50,000 before anyone notices. Forgery. Fraud. Betrayal layered upon betrayal. Brandon felt like he couldn't breathe. I know, baby, I know. Just a few more weeks. Once we get what we need from this family, I'm done playing the devoted wife. Brandon can have his pathetic life back. I'll take the money and we're gone. Brandon stopped the recording. Had heard enough. More than enough. He stood in the hallway, phone clutched in his hand, feeling like his entire world had shattered and reformed in the space of 3 minutes. He walked into the kitchen. Brittany spun around, her face going white. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. His voice was steady, which surprised him. I recorded the whole thing. He watched the calculation happen in her eyes. Panic, then anger, then a quick decision. She plastered on a smile. Baby, that's not what it sounded like. I was just venting to a friend. You know how I get when I'm stressed. Don't, Brandon said. Don't lie anymore. I'm done with the lies. Brittany's smile disappeared. You were spying on me. I was standing in my own house. You were having a conversation about defrauding my parents and cheating on me. He held up his phone. I have it all right here. Her face twisted into something ugly. You really think you're going to use that? Against me? I'll tell everyone you abused me, Brandon. I'll ruin you. No one will believe you. Maybe, Brandon said. But they'll believe the recording. They'll believe the bank records I'm going to pull. They'll believe my parents, who've been trying to warn me for months. Brittany took a step toward him, and for the first time, Brandon saw real fear in her eyes. You wouldn't. Get out of my house, he said quietly. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave. It's my house too, she snarled. Actually, it's not. Check the deed. Your name isn't on it. You contributed no money to the purchase. You have no legal claim here. And after what I just recorded, you won't have any claim in the divorce either. Divorce. Her voice rose. You can't divorce me. We're married. We're supposed to be together. No, Brandon said, and he felt something break free inside him. We were never together. You were using me. You've been using me from the start. And I was too stupid, too desperate to be loved, to see it, but I see it now. Brittany's face changed again, cycling through emotions faster than Brandon could track. Panic, rage, desperation. She tried tears. Brandon, please. I love you. I know I said terrible things, but I was just angry. Your parents have been so awful to me. Stop, he said. Just stop. Pack your things. You have an hour. Then I'm calling the police and having you removed for trespassing. You wouldn't dare. Try me. They stared at each other across the kitchen. Finally, Brittany seemed to realize he was serious. She grabbed her purse and stormed past him. You're going to regret this, she hissed. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. Go ahead, Brandon said. I have nothing to hide anymore. He sat in the living room while she packed, listening to her bang drawers and slam doors. When she came down with 2 suitcases, she stopped at the door. Your mother is a manipulative witch, she said. She's controlled you your whole life. You'll see that eventually. My mother, Brandon said, is the only person who never lied to me. Get out. She left. Brandon locked the door behind her, then sank onto the couch and called me. I answered on the first ring. Brandon, are you okay? Mom, he said, and his voice broke. I need to tell you what just happened. He told me everything, the recording, the conversation, Brittany's threats, her departure. I listened, my heart aching for my son, but also proud, so incredibly proud. You did the right thing, I said. I recorded her admitting to planning fraud, to cheating, to using me. Mom, I feel so stupid. You're not stupid. You were targeted by someone who makes a living out of manipulation. There's a difference. Will you and Dad help me? With the divorce? With everything? I know I don't deserve it after how I treated you. Brandon, I interrupted. You're our son. Of course we'll help. The next morning, Brandon came to the hospital with his phone and his lawyer. Richard was sitting up in bed, color returning to his face, and we all listened to the recording together. The lawyer, a woman named Patricia Hayes, nodded as she listened. This is good, very good. With this, we can prove fraud, infidelity, and intent to commit financial crimes. She won't get anything in the divorce. In fact, she might face criminal charges. I just want her gone, Brandon said. I don't care about punishing her. I just want my life back. Well, make that happen, Patricia said. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved quickly. Brandon filed for divorce. Brittany fought it at first, claiming abuse, claiming manipulation, making every accusation she could think of. But Brandon's recording, combined with the evidence Harold Jenkins had compiled, and statements from Richard's phone messages, painted a clear picture. Brittany's lawyer advised her to take a deal. In exchange for leaving quietly and signing away any claim to the house or Brandon's assets, they wouldn't press criminal charges. She'd also have to pay back the $75,000 Richard and I had invested, though we all knew we'd probably never see that money. Brittany signed the papers. She was gone within a month, moved to another state. Brandon heard through mutual acquaintances that she was already dating someone new, already starting the same pattern over again. But that wasn't our concern anymore. Our concern was helping Brandon heal. Richard came home from the hospital after 5 days, on strict orders to reduce stress, exercise gently, and take his medications. He followed the doctor's orders religiously, said he had too much to live for to take chances. Brandon stayed with us for 2 weeks while the divorce finalized. It was like having our son back for real. He helped Richard with light chores, talked to me while I cooked dinner, and slowly started to smile again. One evening, about 3 weeks after Brittany left, the 3 of us sat on the back porch watching the sunset. Brandon was quiet, and I could tell something was on his mind. I keep thinking about the party, he finally said. About how I let her throw you out, Mom, how I just stood there. Brandon. I started, but he held up his hand. Let me finish. I need to say this. I was so ashamed that night, so humiliated. When Dad stood up and said those 5 words about the deed, part of me was angry. I thought you were controlling me, just like Brittany said. But you weren't controlling me. You were protecting me. You were protecting all of us. And I was too blind to see it. Richard reached over and put his hand on Brandon's shoulder. You see it now. That's what matters. I lost 2 years of my life to her, Brandon said. 2 years of barely seeing you, of missing holidays, of believing lies. I can't get that time back. No, I said, but you have all the time ahead, and we're going to make sure it counts. We sat there together as the sky turned orange and pink, and I felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe, or just the quiet joy of having my family whole again. But there was one more surprise coming, one more twist in this story, and it would change everything. A week later, Harold Jenkins called again. Mrs. Ashley, I have some news you need to hear. We met at the same diner, but this time Brandon came with us. Harold looked pleased to see our son, shook his hand firmly. I'm glad you got out, Harold told Brandon. Stephen Palmer asked me to tell you that. He wants you to know you're not alone. Stephen's the one from the file you showed us, Brandon asked. Yes, he went through exactly what you did. His father, William Palmer, hired me to track Brittany after she nearly destroyed their family. And there's been a development. Harold opened a new folder. After what happened with your family became known, through various channels, 3 other men have come forward. 3 other victims of Brittany's schemes. They're willing to testify, willing to share their stories. With their testimony, combined with yours, we have enough to bring formal charges against Brittany for fraud and conspiracy. Brandon's face was serious. What kind of charges? Fraud. For the forged documents we found in her car when she moved out. Conspiracy to commit elder abuse, based on her recorded conversation about targeting your parents, and potentially more, depending on what else we find. Will it stick? Richard asked. With 4 victims willing to testify? Very likely. The district attorney is interested. This isn't just about one bad marriage anymore. This is about a pattern of predatory behavior. Brandon was quiet for a long moment. Then, what do I have to do? Testify. Tell your story in court. It won't be easy. She'll fight back. But you could stop her from doing this to someone else. Brandon looked at me. Then at Richard. What do you think? I think, Richard said slowly, that courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about doing what's right, even when you're terrified. Brandon nodded. Then do it. Over the next 3 months, things moved through the legal system. Brittany was arrested in her new state and brought back to face charges. She hired an expensive lawyer, cried on local news about being persecuted, tried everything she could to make herself the victim, but the evidence was overwhelming. 4 men, each with similar stories, financial records showing patterns of fraud, recordings, text messages, witness statements. The jury took less than 3 hours to find her guilty. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to all her victims. It wasn't everything, but it was justice. The day the verdict came in, Brandon called me from the courthouse. It's over. Mom, it's really over. How do you feel? Relieved. Tired, but mostly relieved. That night, William Palmer invited our family to dinner. He wanted to meet the people who'd finally helped bring Brittany to justice. His son Stephen was there too, a kind-faced man about Brandon's age who shook our hands warmly. I'm sorry we couldn't warn you sooner, William said. We tried, but she's clever. She intercepts communications, isolates her targets. It's what makes her so dangerous. It's not your fault, I said. You did more than most would have. Stephen and Brandon talked for hours that night, sharing their experiences, their recovery processes. I watched my son laugh for the first time in what felt like years. Really laugh. And my heart filled up. I'm starting a support group, William said over dessert. For families who've been targeted by people like Brittany. Predatory relationships, financial manipulation, isolation tactics. There's not enough support out there for victims and their families. We'd like to help, Richard said. I was hoping you'd say that. William smiled. Over the next year, the support group grew. We met twice a month, sharing stories, offering advice, helping other families recognize warning signs. Brandon became one of the group's most active members. Helping others seemed to help him heal. He moved out of our house after 6 months, got his own apartment, started dating again, carefully this time. Went to therapy regularly, and slowly, the man we'd raised came back fully. It was at one of the support group meetings that he met Emily. She was there supporting her brother, who'd just gotten out of a similar situation. She was a 3rd-grade teacher with red hair and freckles, a laugh that lit up the room, and absolutely no interest in playing games. I like her, Brandon told me after their 3rd date. She's completely different from Brittany. How so? She encourages me to spend time with you and Dad. She wants to meet you, actually. She says family is important. She has her own career, her own life, her own friends. She doesn't need me, Mom. She just wants to be with me. Do you know how different that feels? I met Emily the next week. She brought flowers, asked thoughtful questions, and genuinely laughed at Richard's terrible jokes. When she left, she hugged me tight and whispered, "Thank you for raising such a good man." I cried happy tears that night. Brandon and Emily took their time. No rushed engagement, no quick wedding. They dated for 2 years, making sure they were right for each other. When Brandon finally proposed, he did it at our house, with Richard and me there to celebrate. The wedding was small, intimate, nothing like the show Brittany had demanded. Just family and close friends who mattered. Emily's vows made everyone cry, especially the part where she promised to always support Brandon's relationship with his parents. Brittany was released from prison after serving 3 years. We heard she moved across the country, hopefully to start over properly this time. I don't wish her ill. I just wish she'd find a way to change, to stop hurting people. But that's not my story to tell anymore. 2 years after Brandon and Emily's wedding, I found myself sitting on my back porch again, watching another sunset. Richard sat beside me, his health fully restored. We could hear laughter from inside the house, where Brandon and Emily were preparing dinner. I thought about that terrible night at the housewarming party. Standing in that living room, humiliated and heartbroken, I remembered the sound of Brittany's laugh, the feeling of everyone's eyes on me as I walked toward the door. And I remembered Richard standing up, speaking those 5 words that changed everything, the deeds in our name. Those words weren't just about property ownership. They were about dignity, about refusing to be erased, about loving our son enough to protect him, even from himself. Richard noticed my thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about?" "That party. How awful it was. Worst night of my life," he agreed. "Until it became one of the most important." "How do you figure that?" "Because it forced everything into the light. If Wed just quietly accepted Brittany's behavior. If I hadn't stood up that night, she might have succeeded. Brandon might have lost everything. We might have lost Brandon." I reached over and took his hand. "You were very brave that night." "I was terrified," he admitted. "But I couldn't let her treat you that way. I couldn't let our son think that was acceptable. Those 5 words saved us. Those 5 words were just the beginning. You saved us, Ashley. Your patience, your love, your refusal to give up on Brandon even when he gave up on us. That's what saved our family." We sat quietly, holding hands, listening to our son laugh in the kitchen with the woman he loved. A real, healthy love this time. I've learned so much from this journey. About boundaries and love, about patience and strength, about the difference between supporting someone and enabling their destruction. I learned that sometimes love means holding firm, even when it hurts. Richard's decision to put our names on the deed wasn't about control. It was about wisdom. It was about protecting ourselves and our son from someone who would have taken everything. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Brandon and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, through consistent action and honest communication. He didn't just apologize with words. He apologized with changed behavior, with time, with effort, and I forgave him, truly forgave him. Not because I pretended it didn't hurt, but because I chose love over bitterness. I learned about predatory relationships, about how manipulation works. Brittany didn't just target Brandon's bank account. She targeted his identity, his family bonds, his sense of self-worth. That's what abusers do. They isolate and control. They make you doubt everyone who loves you, until only they remain. We almost lost our son not to distance but to someone who wanted to own him completely. I learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish. When Richard insisted on the co-ownership arrangement, some people thought it was about not trusting Brandon. It wasn't. It was about understanding that love without wisdom is vulnerability. You can love with an open heart while keeping your eyes open too. I learned about the power of speaking truth, even when it's uncomfortable. If Richard hadn't exposed those text messages at the party, Brittany might have succeeded in her plans. Sometimes you have to risk everything to save everything, and I learned that hitting rock bottom can be the start of finding solid ground. That terrible party was the worst day of my life. But it was also the day the lies came crashing down. The day truth won out. The day we started getting our son back. Our family is stronger now. Not despite the crisis, but because of it. We learned to value what truly matters. Honesty, respect, unconditional love that doesn't enable destruction. We learned to recognize manipulation. We learned to set boundaries without guilt. Through the support group, we've helped dozens of other families recognize and escape similar situations. Every time I see the relief on a mother's face when her child finally sees the truth, every time I watch a father stand up to protect his family, I'm reminded that our pain had purpose. Brandon is thriving now, has been promoted twice at work. He and Emily just bought their own house, with their own money, their own deed. They host Sunday dinners now, keeping the tradition alive. Richard and I sit at their table, surrounded by love and laughter, and am grateful for every single moment. Stephen Palmer and his father have become dear friends. The support group continues to grow. We've even started speaking at community centers and churches, teaching people about the warning signs of predatory relationships. Brittany's other victims have all moved on too, found healing, found love, found themselves again. That's the thing about surviving something terrible. It can break you, or it can remake you. We chose remaking. Last week, Brandon stopped by just to visit. No special occasion, no reason except wanting to see his parents. We sat on the porch, the three of us, and he said something that made everything worth it. "Mom, Dad, I know I put you through hell. I know I hurt you, disappointed you, pushed you away. But I want you to know something. The fact that you stood firm, that you refused to let Brittany destroy our family, that you loved me enough to fight for me even when I was fighting against you. That saved my life. Literally saved my life." I couldn't speak around the lump in my throat, so I just hugged him tight. That party, that terrible night, was a battle. A battle for my son's future, for our family's integrity, for the truth. Some battles wound us deeply, but the right ones, the necessary ones, they remake us into something stronger. We survived the storm. We found sunshine on the other side, and now we help others find their way through too. Sometimes I still think about Brittany. I hope she gets help. I hope she changes. I hope she finds a way to build a life without destroying others. But mostly, I've let her go. She doesn't get space in my head anymore. What gets space is gratitude. For Richard's courage. For Brandon's strength in choosing truth. For Emily's genuine love. For family members who stood by us. For Harold Jenkins and William Palmer, who refused to let another family suffer. For the legal system that finally held Brittany accountable. And for those 5 words that changed everything. The deeds in our name. Those words represented more than property rights. They represented the right to be respected in your own family. The right to protect yourself without apology. The right to say no, even to people you love, especially when saying yes would harm them. If I could go back to that night, standing in that living room with everyone staring at me, would I change anything? Would I want to avoid that pain? No, because that night, painful as it was, saved us all. It brought truth into the light. It started Brandon's journey back to himself. It reminded us what matters. We're not a perfect family. We still have disagreements, still make mistakes. But we're honest now. We're present. We're whole. And that's worth everything. To anyone listening who sees themselves in this story, who's watching someone they love be isolated and controlled, who's being manipulated by someone who makes love feel like ownership, I want you to hear this clearly. You deserve respect. You deserve honesty. You deserve love that doesn't require you to betray yourself or your family. And you have the right to protect yourself, even from people you love, especially when they're being influenced by someone dangerous. Stand firm in your worth. Set boundaries without guilt. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Speak truth even when it's terrifying. And never, ever stop fighting for the people you love. even when they're fighting against you. Because sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone's destruction. Sometimes, saving someone means standing still while they rage against you. Sometimes the word no is the greatest gift you can give. Richard knew that when he stood up at that party. He knew that protecting me, protecting our investment, protecting the truth, was more important than keeping false peace. His courage gave Brandon permission to be courageous too. And now, our family is living proof that you can survive betrayal, survive manipulation, survive heartbreak, and come out stronger on the other side. The story could have ended differently if we'd backed down, given up, or let shame silence us. But we didn't. We chose truth. We chose family. We chose each other. And that made all the difference. So here I am, sitting on my porch with my husband of 42 years now, listening to my son and daughter-in-law laugh in the kitchen, surrounded by love that's real and honest and tested by fire. This is what victory looks like. Not perfect, not without scars, but genuine. I wouldn't trade a moment of it, even the painful ones, especially the painful ones, because they brought us here, to this peace, to this joy, to this hard-won, beautiful life. And that's worth every tear we shed along the way. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members, even when it caused conflict? Have you or someone you love experienced manipulation or isolation in a relationship? How did you find the strength to stand firm? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. And if you believe others could benefit from hearing about the power of boundaries and standing firm in love, please share this story. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about family, resilience, and finding strength in difficult times. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. May you always have the courage to protect what matters, the wisdom to know the difference between love and manipulation, and the peace that comes from standing firm in your truth. Be well, be strong, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to let someone we love destroy themselves or us. Hold your boundaries with love. Speak your truth with courage. And never forget that real love never demands you betray yourself. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people you love.